A diver explores an ancient shipwreck deep in the Red Sea when a massive hammerhead shark appears out of nowhere. The shark circles closer, its movements aggressive. Suddenly it charges, slamming into the diver's equipment, knocking him off balance. Struggling to regain control, the diver sees the shark coming back for another strike. What happens next is a fight for survival deep beneath the waves. On the morning of August 14, 2010, Lily Evans, a 10-year-old girl from Huntington Beach, California, set out for an early walk along the quiet, secluded stretch of beach near her family's summer cottage. Her parents were still sipping coffee on the porch, and the beach was practically deserted. The day was just beginning, and the water, although close by, was still and calm. Lily loved these mornings where she could collect seashells and observe the tide pools, but today would be different. As she strolled along the shore, something unusual caught her eye further up the beach. It was large, almost too big to believe, and as she got closer, Lily realized it was a massive great white shark stranded on the sand. The shark's body lay motionless, its skin glistening under the morning light. For a moment, Lily froze in fear and awe. She had never seen a creature this size up close before. It was both majestic and terrifying, but more than anything, she was struck by the sadness of seeing such a powerful predator beached and vulnerable. Lily's initial shock quickly turned to concern. She could see that the shark was still alive. Its gills moved faintly, struggling to draw in air. Driven by a surge of empathy and determination, she knew she couldn't just walk away. She turned and ran back toward her family's cottage, shouting for her parents. Her mother and father quickly followed her to the beach, and upon seeing the stranded shark, they immediately called the local lifeguards. Within minutes, lifeguards and beachgoers started gathering around the shark, shocked by the size of the creature that had washed ashore. The lifeguards sprang into action, contacting marine wildlife rescue teams who specialized in helping stranded marine animals. While waiting for the experts to arrive, the lifeguards and onlookers kept the shark hydrated by splashing water over its massive body, trying to keep it alive long enough for help to come. As the scene unfolded, Lily stood back with her parents, watching the lifeguards work. But as she observed the shark closely, something began to bother her. Along the side of its body were strange markings, deep cuts and scars, some fresh and others healed over. There were also strange, jagged wounds around the shark's mouth and dorsal fin. Lily's curiosity led her to step closer, taking note of every detail, and she couldn't help but feel that these injuries weren't natural. When the marine rescue team arrived, they carefully examined the shark. Lily overheard their conversations about how unusual it was for a great white shark to end up stranded like this. The rescue team was experienced with marine animals, but something about this situation was different. One of the experts, Dr. Karen Thompson, a marine biologist, noticed Lily's keen interest and approached her. Dr. Thompson encouraged Lily to share what she had observed, and Lily pointed out the unusual scars and cuts on the shark's body. Dr. Thompson's expression shifted to one of concern. She agreed that the injuries didn't look typical of what they usually saw with stranded sharks. After careful observation, she concluded that the shark had likely been involved in a series of aggressive encounters, possibly with other sharks, or even more disturbingly, man-made objects like fishing nets or debris. Dr. Thompson suspected that the shark's injuries might be connected to increased human activity and pollution in the area. Over the next few hours, the rescue team worked to stabilize the shark. They attached special flotation devices and prepared to transport it back into deeper waters, hoping it could still be saved. Lily stayed close by the entire time, watching in awe as the team worked to preserve the life of the animal she had found. As the great white shark was gently guided back into the ocean, there was a collective sigh of relief among the rescuers. The shark slowly swam away, disappearing into the water, though it would take time to know if it had truly survived the ordeal. That night, Lily couldn't stop thinking about the shark. She wondered if it was going to be all right, but more than that, she was troubled by the idea that other sharks might be in danger. She decided to learn more about what might be happening in the ocean that might cause distress for these powerful creatures. The next day, Lily returned to the beach where she met with Dr. Thompson again. Lily asked her questions about sharks and what could be causing them to end up stranded or injured. Dr. Thompson explained that rising ocean temperatures, Increased pollution and overfishing were all contributing to changes in marine ecosystems. Sharks, as apex predators, were being affected by these changes, and their behavior was becoming more unpredictable. Dr. Thompson invited Lily to assist her in tracking and studying shark activity along the coast. Lily eagerly accepted. Together, they began to gather data on similar incidents of stranded or injured sharks along the California coastline. They documented scars and injuries, monitored water temperatures, and analyzed the effects of pollution on marine wildlife. Lily's keen eye and determination helped Dr. Thompson uncover patterns linking these shark encounters to rising ocean temperatures and human interference. Over the next few months, their research revealed that the sharks' natural hunting grounds were being disrupted by climate change, forcing them closer to shore, where they were more likely to encounter fishing nets, boats, and other dangers. The research findings were presented to local authorities, sparking a broader conversation about marine conservation and the importance of reducing pollution. Lily's involvement in the project didn't go unnoticed. Word of her discovery spread, and soon the local community became invested in helping protect the marine environment. Beach cleanup efforts increased, and new regulations were introduced to limit harmful fishing practices that endangered sharks and other marine life. Lily's actions that day on the beach had sparked a movement. What began as a simple act of compassion grew into a community-wide effort to protect the ocean and its inhabitants. Through her curiosity and bravery, Lily had shown that even one small action could make a huge difference in the fight to preserve the planet's fragile ecosystems. On May 10, 2008, the luxury dive safari Azure Explorer was anchored off the coast of a small Bahamian island called Rose Cay. The group of divers aboard had traveled from various parts of the world to explore the vibrant reefs and encounter the ocean's most incredible creatures, including reef sharks and stingrays. The Bahamian waters were teeming with life, and it was known that these waters occasionally attracted tiger sharks, powerful predators with a reputation for their solitary and unpredictable behavior. Among the group were marine biology enthusiasts, experienced divers, and some tourists eager to experience the thrill of diving for the first time. Leading the expedition was Captain Neil Beckett, a seasoned diver with over 2 decades of experience in these waters. Alongside him was Hannah Miles, a marine biologist researching local shark populations, who was excited to introduce the group to the wonders of marine life. The day had started out perfectly. The divers had already completed 2 successful dives, each one more breathtaking than the last. They had spotted schools of brightly colored fish, graceful rays gliding over the sand, and even a few small reef sharks who had swum curiously close before darting off into the deeper waters. The group was in high spirits as they prepared for their 3rd dive, a more adventurous location near a series of coral reefs known for attracting larger marine predators. As the group geared up, the ocean remained calm, inviting them back into its depths. Captain Beckett gave the signal, and one by one the divers slipped into the water, descending into a blue world of coral forests and the rhythmic pulse of marine life. Hannah guided the group, pointing out various species of fish and coral formations. It seemed like another perfect dive, until the mood shifted. It began with a subtle change in the water's rhythm. Hannah noticed first. A shadow passed overhead, slow but deliberate. She looked up to see the unmistakable shape of a tiger shark, large, muscular, and moving closer. Hannah knew enough about these predators to recognize this wasn't typical behavior. Normally, tiger sharks were solitary and cautious around humans, often passing by without much interest. But this shark was different. It wasn't passing by, it was circling. The divers remained calm at first, continuing their dive as they had been trained, but the tiger shark's presence became more persistent. It circled tighter, its movements more focused and erratic. Hannah signaled to the group to stay close together, hoping the shark would eventually lose interest and swim away. But the predator seemed fixated on them. After a tense few minutes, the shark charged. Its powerful body cut through the water, heading directly toward the group before swerving sharply at the last moment. Panic rippled through the divers. Several of them began ascending too quickly, while others struggled to stay composed. Hannah motioned for everyone to stay calm, knowing that panicking would only increase the danger. But the shark wasn't done. It turned and charged again, this time faster, brushing past one of the divers and sending a wave of terror through the group. Captain Beckett, monitoring the situation from the boat, saw the shark's aggressive movements and knew they had to get everyone out of the water fast. He signaled the divers to return to the surface, but the shark followed them, relentless in its pursuit. As the divers neared the safety of the boat, the shark made another pass, coming so close to one of the divers that it knocked into their tank, sending them tumbling through the water. Once the divers were finally pulled aboard, the mood was tense and anxious. The shark lingered near the boat, circling with an almost menacing presence. The once calm and beautiful sea now felt threatening. The tiger shark rammed the boat's hull with its snout, leaving everyone on edge as it thrashed against the vessel, testing its boundaries. Captain Beckett maneuvered the boat away from the shark, but the predator continued to follow them. With no other option, Beckett decided to guide the Azure Explorer through the shallower waters, hoping the reef would deter the shark from following them further. The boat navigated through tight channels between the coral, while the crew and passengers remained on high alert. The shark followed for longer than anyone expected, only backing off when the boat entered waters too shallow for it to navigate comfortably. Once the danger had passed, the divers sat in shock, trying to process what had just happened. It was clear that the shark's behavior had been unusual, and Hannah couldn't stop thinking about why the predator had been so aggressive. Over the next few days, as the group continued their expedition more cautiously, Hannah and Captain Beckett began discussing possible reasons for the tiger shark's behavior. Hannah's research had already shown a pattern of increased aggression in sharks in the region. Overfishing had depleted the local food sources, forcing predators like tiger sharks to venture closer to shore and interact with humans more frequently. Additionally, habitat destruction, caused by both tourism and climate change, was stressing the marine ecosystem, leading to unpredictable changes in animal behavior. Once the dive safari concluded, Hannah returned to her research lab with new data. She began compiling reports on the unusual aggression in tiger sharks and presented her findings to marine conservation groups in the Bahamas. The incident with the Azure Explorer wasn't an isolated case. Other divers and fishermen had begun reporting similar encounters with sharks that had previously been considered rare and unlikely. As the news of these shark encounters spread, Hannah worked closely with local authorities and conservationists to promote better protection for the marine environment. She pushed for stricter regulations on overfishing and better practices in tourism to limit habitat destruction. Sustainable practices became a core focus of her work to preserve the fragile balance between humans and marine life. On the morning of April 17, 2006, the small riverine community of São Miguel, nestled along the banks of the Rio Solimões in the Amazon basin, was still reeling from the aftermath of the worst flooding in decades. The water levels had risen dramatically, swallowing entire sections of the village. Families had relocated to higher ground, and boats now floated where streets and fields once lay. Flooding was not unusual in the Amazon, but this year had been different, more severe, more unpredictable. The people of São Miguel were resilient, though. They had weathered many challenges, relying on the river for food, transportation, and life. But what they couldn't anticipate was the new threat that came with the rising waters: bull sharks. On that fateful day, João Pereira, a 42-year-old fisherman who had lived his entire life along the river, set out in his small wooden boat as he had done countless times before. The floodwaters had made fishing difficult, but João was determined to provide for his family. The air was thick with humidity and the flooded landscape felt eerily quiet. He paddled out to a familiar spot, casting his nets and waiting patiently for a catch. As the hours passed, João began to notice something unusual. The water around him seemed to ripple in an unnatural way, not like the movements of the usual river fish he was used to. He brushed off the feeling of unease, attributing it to the disturbed ecosystem caused by the floods. But as he pulled in his net, his boat jolted suddenly. Startled, João glanced over the side and saw something that made his blood run cold: an enormous bull shark, larger than anything he had ever seen in these waters, circling his boat. João had heard stories of bull sharks before. These predators were known for their ability to thrive in both salt and fresh water. often venturing far upstream into rivers and estuaries. However, no one in São Miguel had ever seen one this far inland. The shark was powerful, its body moving with deliberate predatory intent. Before João could react, the shark charged at the boat, its heavy body ramming into the side with such force that João was knocked off balance. He clung to the side, trying to steady himself, but the shark wasn't finished. It came back again, this time breaching the surface and knocking João into the water. Panic surged through João as he thrashed in the murky floodwaters, desperately trying to climb back into the boat. The shark circled closer, its fins slicing through the water with terrifying precision. João's heart raced as he kicked his legs frantically, trying to keep the shark at bay. But it was too fast. The bull shark struck again, its jaws clamping down on João's leg, dragging him under the water. The struggle felt like it lasted forever, though it was only moments before João managed to break free, the shark tearing a chunk of flesh from his leg. He surfaced, gasping for air, and with a burst of adrenaline, pulled himself back into the boat, bleeding and in shock. The shark circled a few more times before finally retreating into the depths of the swollen river. João's survival was nothing short of a miracle. He managed to make his way back to the village where he collapsed in pain and exhaustion. His injuries were severe but not life-threatening, and as word spread of the attack, the entire community of São Miguel was thrown into a state of panic. Bull sharks had never been a problem this far upstream before, but now it seemed the flooding had brought these dangerous predators into their very homes. In the days that followed, more sightings of bull sharks were reported in the area. Fishermen abandoned their boats, children were forbidden from playing near the water, and fear gripped the community. The once life-giving river had turned into something sinister. Local authorities were baffled by the sudden appearance of the sharks, and they called in environmental scientists from the nearby city of Manaus to investigate. Among the scientists was Dr. Raquel Almeida, an expert in freshwater ecosystems and shark behavior. She arrived in São Miguel with a team of researchers, determined to understand what had driven the bull sharks so far inland. After speaking with João and other villagers, Dr. Almeida began tracking the sharks' movements, using sonar equipment and tagging the few they could find. What she discovered was alarming. The bull sharks were not simply lost, they were adapting to the new environment caused by the flooding. The intense rains and rising water temperatures created the perfect conditions for the sharks to migrate further into the river system. The destruction of their natural habitats, combined with overfishing and climate change, had pushed them into unfamiliar territories in search of food. The once distant predators were now a direct threat to the people of São Miguel, and something had to be done. As the scientists worked to track and study the sharks, the community came together to protect themselves. They built barriers along the riverbank and established designated fishing areas that were regularly monitored for shark activity. Dr. Almeida and her team held meetings with the villagers, educating them about the sharks' behavior and what could be done to minimize the risks. She explained that while the sharks were dangerous, they were also victims of the same environmental changes that were affecting the people. The floods brought chaos to both species, and finding a way to coexist was crucial. Over time, the community adapted. The floodwaters receded, and while the bull sharks remained a presence in the river, attacks became less frequent as people learned how to live with the new reality. Dr. Almeida's research helped shape new conservation efforts in the region, focusing on protecting both the sharks and the people who depended on the river for their livelihoods. The flooding had been a wake-up call, not just for São Miguel but for many other communities along the Amazon. It was clear that climate change was altering the balance of nature in ways that could no longer be ignored. On March 15, 2004, the Similan Islands in Thailand were alive with energy as participants from around the world gathered for the annual international snorkeling competition. The event had grown in popularity over the years, attracting adventurous swimmers eager to explore the island's renowned coral reefs. The competition took place near Koh Myang, one of the 9 islands in the Similan archipelago, famous for its vibrant underwater world teeming with colorful fish, rays, and, most thrilling for many participants, reef sharks. The water was clear that morning, and the competition began smoothly. Swimmers took turns navigating a marked course along the reef, collecting points for identifying marine species and completing challenges. Among the participants was 27-year-old Elena Rossi, an experienced diver from Italy, who was excited to experience Thailand's rich biodiversity. It was her first time in the Similan Islands, and she had heard stories of encounters with reef sharks, though she had never witnessed one up close. The white-tip reef sharks, a common sight in these waters, were generally known for their shy nature. They preferred the shallow coral reefs and, though they could be curious about snorkelers, typically kept their distance. But as Elena and the other participants moved through the water, things started to feel off. The usually calm shark seemed more active than usual, darting between the coral with strange aggression. Elena swam forward cautiously, sensing a shift in the water around her. She spotted two white-tip reef sharks circling faster and closer than expected, their movements jerky and uncharacteristic. They appeared stressed, their sleek bodies cutting through the water with a menacing precision that set her nerves on edge. She wasn't the only one to notice. Some of the other participants began to pull back, clearly uncomfortable with the shark's behavior. As the competitors pressed on, the situation rapidly escalated. The sharks began closing in on the snorkelers, their once passive curiosity morphing into something more threatening. One of the sharks lunged unexpectedly, bumping into a swimmer's leg. Panic rippled through the group as another shark, unprovoked, darted toward Elena, brushing past her with surprising force. Elena kicked out in reflex, heart pounding as the shark circled back. The competitors' excitement quickly turned to fear. Several swimmers began yelling for help, frantically trying to return to the safety of the boats. Elena, along with the others, started swimming back toward the surface, but the sharks seemed to grow more aggressive. More of them appeared from deeper in the reef, joining the frenzy as if stirred by the escalating panic in the water. The lifeguards stationed on the boats immediately noticed the distress and sprang into action. Whistles blew as rescue boats sped toward the panicked swimmers, pulling people out of the water as quickly as possible. Chaos ensued as participants scrambled to escape the threat below, their once leisurely competition transforming into a fight for safety. Elena could feel her heart racing as she kicked furiously toward the boat. Still, the sharks followed, circling and bumping against the snorkelers with increasing aggression. The organizers, realizing the severity of the situation, called off the event and began herding the remaining competitors out of the water. Elena was among the last to be pulled aboard a rescue boat, her body trembling from the adrenaline. She sat with the other participants, breathing heavily, eyes scanning the water below, where the sharks continued to swim in frenzied circles. Once everyone was safe, the event organizers and marine biologists quickly began investigating the cause of the sudden aggression. The white-tip reef sharks had never behaved like this before. Dr. Samuel Cruz, a marine biologist who had been observing the competition, was particularly alarmed. He had spent years studying reef sharks and knew their behavior well, but nothing about this incident made sense. As the team gathered on the boats, they pieced together what might have triggered the sharks. One of the local guides mentioned that there had been recent episodes of coral bleaching in the area due to rising ocean temperatures. The vibrant coral reefs, which had once been thriving, were now showing signs of stress. Pollution and overfishing have further strained the delicate ecosystem. Dr. Cruz believed that the combination of these environmental stressors could have affected the sharks, altering their behavior and making them more aggressive. The sharks, disoriented and possibly deprived of their usual food sources, might have seen the large group of snorkelers as a threat to their territory, or an unfamiliar presence in their already deteriorating habitat. The incident left a lasting impact on everyone involved. The snorkeling competition was suspended indefinitely, and the local authorities worked with marine experts to implement new safety protocols for future ecotourism events. Signs were posted around the Similan Islands warning visitors of the potential risks associated with snorkeling in shark-inhabited waters, and tighter regulations were put in place to protect both the sharks and the fragile coral reefs. Elena, though shaken by the experience, returned to the water a few days later under Dr. Cruz's guidance. This time she approached the reef with a newfound respect for the balance between humans and marine life. She had always been fascinated by sharks, but her encounter had shown her how vulnerable these creatures could be when their environment was threatened. Dr. Cruz continued his research into the effects of coral bleaching and pollution on shark populations, using the incident as a case study to push for greater awareness of the impact human activity had on marine ecosystems. The event served as a wake-up call, not only for the local community, but also for tourists and environmentalists alike, highlighting the need for adaptive management in ecotourism activities. It became clear that even in paradise, there were consequences to the growing stress on marine life, and steps needed to be taken to preserve the delicate balance that sustained both humans and wildlife. In the end, the snorkeling competition was transformed into something more than just a tourist attraction. It became a symbol of the importance of environmental stewardship and the responsibility humans had to protect the creatures they shared the ocean with. In the early morning of June 11, 2002, a team of international underwater archaeologists set out for a day of exploration in the depths of the Red Sea off the coast of Egypt. They were a seasoned group dedicated to uncovering the mysteries hidden in the ancient shipwrecks that lay beneath the surface. The waters around the Red Sea were famous for their historical significance, and the archaeologists, led by Dr. Ian Wallace, had been meticulously cataloging artifacts from sunken vessels believed to be thousands of years old. The goal was to document items from a newly discovered wreck that could reveal trade routes and connections between ancient civilizations. The team consisted of Dr. Wallace, an experienced marine archaeologist in his late 40s, Sophie Laurent, a French underwater photographer, and Ahmed Nasser, an Egyptian maritime historian who had spent his life studying the region's maritime heritage. Together, they had spent weeks diving into these waters, uncovering treasures from the past. That morning, they were focused and excited about what the day's dive might reveal. The wreck site lay 40 meters below, and the visibility was perfect for documenting the fragile remains. However, the Red Sea was not just a haven for ancient artifacts. It was also home to some of the world's most iconic marine predators. Hammerhead sharks, with their uniquely shaped heads and sharp senses, were often seen cruising the deeper waters. The team had encountered them before, and usually the sharks kept their distance, simply curious about the strange intruders in their domain. As they descended that morning, the mood was calm. The shipwreck came into view, its ancient timbers and scattered pottery telling silent stories of a forgotten past. Sophie set up her camera equipment while Dr. Wallace and Ahmed began to examine the remains of what appeared to be an ancient cargo hold. The dive was progressing smoothly, with each team member deeply absorbed in their work. Then, without warning, a large shadow passed overhead. Sophie looked up from her camera and saw the unmistakable shape of a hammerhead shark. It was massive, larger than any they had encountered before. The shark circled slowly, its wide-set eyes scanning the group as it passed. Sophie felt a wave of anxiety wash over her but stayed calm. Hammerheads were known to be curious but rarely aggressive unless provoked. She signaled to the others, alerting them to the shark's presence. Dr. Wallace glanced up and saw not just one but several hammerheads now circling above. It was unusual to see so many at once, but the team kept their focus, hoping the sharks would pass without incident. The archaeologists had faced challenges before, from strong currents to equipment failures, and they had always managed to persevere. But this was different. This was a living threat, and it was growing more unsettling by the minute. One of the sharks broke away from the group, swimming directly toward the archaeologists. It was larger and more aggressive, its movements sharper and more deliberate. The team held their ground, maintaining their distance as they continued their work. But the shark wasn't backing down. It moved closer, brushing past Sophie's camera rig with such force that it knocked it off balance. The shark circled back, its territorial behavior becoming more evident. Dr. Wallace quickly signaled for the team to begin their ascent. It was clear that they needed to de-escalate the situation before someone got hurt. But as they started to move, the aggressive hammerhead made another pass, this time heading straight for Ahmed. The shark rammed into his equipment, nearly knocking him off balance. Ahmed fought to steady himself, his heart pounding as the shark circled again. The situation was escalating rapidly. Dr. Wallace, thinking quickly, instructed the team to move toward the nearby coral formations. They hoped the reef would provide some protection from the shark's erratic behavior. The team huddled near the coral, staying as still as possible while the sharks continued to circle. Sophie kept a close eye on the aggressive hammerhead, her breath steady but her nerves frayed. For several tense minutes, the hammerhead swam in and out of sight, their movements almost coordinated as they patrolled the area. Dr. Wallace knew they needed to distract the aggressive shark long enough for the team to ascend safely. Using a small piece of equipment that emitted low-frequency sounds, he created a diversion, hoping the shark would be drawn away from them. It worked momentarily. The hammerhead turned its attention to the sound, giving the team a brief window to begin their slow, controlled ascent to the surface. As they ascended, the sharks lingered below, but the aggressive behavior seemed to subside as the team neared the boat. When they finally broke the surface, the archaeologists were exhausted but relieved to have escaped unscathed. However, the experience left them deeply unsettled. Something had clearly disturbed the sharks, causing them to behave in a way that was unusual for the species. Back on the boat, Dr. Wallace and his team discussed the encounter. They had always known there were risks associated with diving in shark-inhabited waters, but this felt different. Sophie, still shaken, mentioned that she had noticed signs of coral bleaching in the area. The once vibrant reef had shown signs of decay, its colors fading due to rising water temperatures and pollution. Could the environmental stressors have contributed to the sharks' agitation? Dr. Wallace believed it was a possibility. The Red Sea had experienced significant environmental changes in recent years, and those changes were likely affecting the marine life that called it home. The archaeologists realized that their work was not just about preserving history. It was also about understanding how modern threats, like climate change and pollution, were impacting the natural world. In the days that followed, Dr. Wallace and his team made contact with local marine conservationists to share their observations. They recommended that shark experts accompany future dives in the area, and that more attention be given to the environmental health of the region. The archaeologists had come to the Red Sea to explore the past. Still, they left with a deeper understanding of the present, how human activity was shaping the behavior of marine predators in ways they hadn't fully understood. On a humid morning in April 2007, the Marine Conservation Team at the KwaZulu-Natal Coastal Reserve in South Africa was gearing up for another day of research. The project, located near the small coastal town of Umkomazi, focused on studying zebra sharks, a typically gentle and nocturnal species known for their docile nature. These distinctive sharks, with their spotted patterns, were a favorite among divers and marine biologists. The team, led by Dr. Marlon Jacobs, had been conducting extensive research on the species for months, monitoring their behaviors and health as part of a larger conservation effort to protect the fragile reef ecosystem. On this particular day, the crew was preparing for a routine dive to check on tracking devices they had attached to several zebra sharks in the area. The waters off the coast were rich with marine life, making it an ideal location for studying various species. Still, they had recently noticed some unusual behavior among the zebra sharks. Normally shy and peaceful, the sharks had started to act unpredictably, even during daylight hours, which was highly unusual for a species known to prefer nighttime feeding. Dr. Jacobs, a marine biologist in his early 40s, had been leading the research team for over a decade. That morning, as he reviewed the plans with his team, young researchers like Tessa Moore and Ethan Naidu, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The last dive had been chaotic, with several sharks behaving aggressively, something they had never encountered before. Equipment had been damaged, and the researchers had narrowly avoided injury when one shark slammed into a diver's gear. Despite the growing concerns, the team pressed on, determined to understand what was happening. They entered the water just after sunrise, with Dr. Jacobs leading the way. The dive site was a familiar one, a vibrant reef teeming with life, and the zebra sharks had been regular visitors for months. As the team descended, they noticed the zebra sharks almost immediately. But instead of their usual slow, meandering pace, the sharks were moving quickly, darting between the researchers in erratic patterns. Tessa, who was monitoring one of the underwater cameras, suddenly found herself face to face with a zebra shark that was acting anything but docile. It swam toward her faster than she'd ever seen a zebra shark move, its sleek body brushing against her equipment. Startled, she tried to back away, but the shark didn't relent. It circled her, bumping against her repeatedly as if it were defending territory. Tessa's heart raced as she struggled to keep calm, knowing that panicking would only make things worse. At the same time, Dr. Jacobs and Ethan were having their own close encounters. Another zebra shark had started thrashing near one of their tracking devices, its tail whipping wildly against the coral. Ethan was attempting to fix one of the damaged transmitters when the shark suddenly turned on him, its large body hitting his arm hard enough to knock him off balance. Ethan tumbled backward, catching himself just before colliding with the reef. The sharks, it seemed, were becoming more territorial and dangerous. Dr. Jacobs signaled for the team to regroup. Something was clearly wrong, and they needed to get out of the water. But as they began their ascent, the sharks continued to follow them, uncharacteristically aggressive. One of the sharks swam directly at Dr. Jacobs, ramming into his oxygen tank with a force that left him momentarily winded. The team quickly made it back to the surface and climbed into the boat, breathless and rattled by the encounter. Back on shore, the team began reviewing the footage and data they had collected. What they saw confirmed their fears. The zebra sharks were exhibiting territorial and competitive behaviors they had never documented before. The peaceful species had turned aggressive, and they needed to understand why. Tessa suggested that the behavior could be linked to environmental changes they had noticed over the past few months. The reef's ecosystem was deteriorating rapidly, with increased algae growth suffocating the coral and fish populations dwindling. Overfishing in the nearby waters had also increased, leading to a scarcity of prey for the sharks. Dr. Jacobs agreed. As they reviewed data from their tracking devices, they noticed that the zebra sharks' movements had changed significantly. Instead of roaming freely across large areas of the reef, they were confining themselves to smaller territories, defending what little resources remained. The disruptions to their habitat had forced them into survival mode, creating a more competitive and aggressive environment, even among typically gentle species like zebra sharks. In the days that followed, the team worked tirelessly to adjust their conservation strategies. Dr. Jacobs reached out to local marine authorities and environmental groups, sharing his findings and calling for immediate action to address the overfishing and pollution that were destabilizing the reef's delicate balance. He knew that without swift intervention, the situation would only worsen, not just for the zebra sharks, but for the entire ecosystem that relied on the health of the reef. The team also took steps to ensure the safety of their researchers. They began implementing new safety protocols for their dives, limiting the time they spent in shark-inhabited areas and using advanced equipment to monitor the sharks' behavior more closely. While they continued their work, they did so with a greater sense of caution and respect for the unpredictable nature of the ocean. As the weeks passed, the aggressive incidents decreased, but the message was clear. Human activities were having a profound impact on marine wildlife, even on species once considered harmless. Dr. Jacobs and his team remained committed to their conservation efforts, but they also knew that their work had to go beyond simply protecting individual species. It required a broader approach to managing the entire ecosystem, ensuring that the habitats the zebra sharks and other marine creatures depended on could thrive once again. By the end of the year, Dr. Jacobs had presented his findings at several international conferences, calling for greater awareness of the ripple effects of overfishing, pollution, and habitat destruction on marine life. The once docile zebra sharks had become a symbol of the urgent need for comprehensive environmental management and sustainable practices. The team at KwaZulu-Natal continued their work, but the memory of the zebra shark's aggression served as a constant reminder of how fragile the balance between humans and nature could be. The ocean, they had learned, was full of surprises, some beautiful, others dangerous, but all worth fighting to protect.